Hi, Steve Queen here with LivewickMedia. Welcome to part one of Simply Follow. Simply Follow is a booklet that I made for myself so I could better understand what it means for me to simply follow Jesus as an individual, and also how I and others could simply follow Jesus together. So that's the impetus behind it. And I'd like to begin by just looking inside of this booklet, looking on the introduction page. If you have one, you can follow along. As always, you can go to livewicksimplyfollow. You can go to the written words section, go to Simply Follow, and you can download your own PDF. You can print your own booklet if you want to, and use it for yourself. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But I want to be clear about where this came from. And so reading from the introduction, imagine if you were to simply follow Jesus. What would that look like? How would you do it? Who else would you want to take that journey with? What if you could follow Jesus and not get bogged down or burdened with human-made religion? What if there were other people who wanted to explore with you what it means to follow Jesus? Prior to this booklet, I had many years of my life, the first many, not really following Jesus, not interested in all of that. And then I came to faith. I was born again. I became a Jesus follower. And I got exposed to a lot of things called church, different denominations and emphases and all kinds of stuff. And it was a lot to try to take in, a lot to try to sort through. There seemed to be people that were adamant about certain practices, fill in the blank, washing feet, lots of other things that they thought should be done. Other groups thought other things should be done or not done. And I thought, wow, there's a lot of noise here. What people are calling church is noisy, and there's all these different factions and all of that. And I thought, this somehow just doesn't seem right. Honestly, it doesn't seem that there's this infighting. And anyway, just a lot of things that I'd experienced. Maybe you can relate to that, where Jesus is wonderful, church is less wonderful, sometimes exhausting. Sometimes you just want to go sit in a boat, right, and talk to Jesus, or just be somewhere by yourself, or maybe with one good friend. All of that was a deeper yearning for the purity and simplicity of devotion to Christ, like Paul writes about in the New Testament. And so there had been a difficulty that we had gone through, and I really wanted to understand what I needed to do next. Something that I had been thinking about and wanting to work toward, and all that just didn't come through. So I was ready to re-examine everything. I said, Lord, I surrender everything. All I really know is Jesus rose from the dead, and I love my wife and kids. That's about it. And I just sat alone with the Lord for a long time and laid aside a lot of things. Everything basically other than what I just told you. Anyway, what floated up in me one day was this. I felt almost inside like a beach ball coming up in the water. Just something rose up inside of me, and it was as if I could hear it internally. Simply follow Jesus. And in that moment, that was like oxygen for me. My head and my heart weren't noisy. I had dumped the noise of church and all kinds of stuff. I had gotten rid of that by the grace of God, and I was just sitting in silence for I don't know how long and how many days and all that. But in time, that's what rose up inside of me. Simply follow Jesus. And that was the beginnings of what became this book, and really a reorientation, more importantly, to just aligning with him and my abiding relationship with him really being number one in my life, number one priority. Number two is, out of that abiding relationship, having relationships with others that are Jesus-centered and led by the Holy Spirit. That's what he wants. And so this booklet, this small book, is a documentation of things that I learned since that moment where I had that clear understanding, that hearing on the inside in my spirit, simply follow Jesus. And I'll be the first to point out that's not a new idea. But like an old mentor of mine said, it's not what's new, but what's true that sets you free. New is a little overrated. New things have their place. This is not new. Jesus is not new. But there have been a lot of accretions onto who Jesus is that have gotten in the way. And I'll share a link to a video of illustrating how stuff gets mixed in with the message of Jesus and it gets distasteful. And I'll share that down in the description on the YouTube channel, and I'll also put it on livewicksimplyfollow.com. All right, all of that preamble to say, let's go into the introduction again. That first word to me is extremely important. Imagine. Just imagine. We all get so immersed in what's going on with life that it can be hard to imagine things, to imagine that anything could be different, that church could be different, that following Jesus could be different, that you could be less of a failure, maybe how you see it. Maybe you see yourself as a tremendous spiritual failure, which may or may not be true. Maybe you see yourself as somebody who you've realized that you've just become really arrogant and Pharisee-like. That happens. Or maybe you've just given up on church or anything to do with organized religion, quote unquote, and you do just go sit in a boat and talk to Jesus. There are a myriad of experiences any of you may have had or be having, but I want to encourage you. After this video, please just take a minute or two or 5 or hours, if you want, whatever fits, to just let yourself imagine. Imagine something not only different, but better. Not new, ancient, and straight from the Bible. Imagine if you were to simply follow Jesus. That's it. What would that look like? That's what we're going to get into. What does it look like if you simply follow Jesus? All three of those words are very, very important. What would that look like? How would you do it? That's a real concern and real question. I mean, how would you do it? What would that even look like to simply follow Jesus? And if you have a church background, the first thing that might kick in from your brainstem is, well, I got to go to church somewhere. I've only got, where I live, 17 church buildings probably within 2 miles of where I live. You may live someplace where there are none. But my point is that to imagine something new, not only new for you, but different, better, biblical, free, simple, exactly what God wants. We have to be willing to say, wait a minute, whatever my preconceived ideas are, I must be willing to set those aside. I may have to set aside a lot of things. Remember, the genesis of this, the origin of this, was me getting to the end of myself and saying, I don't even know anymore. I'm not sure about structure and this and that and all these other things. All I know is Jesus rose from the dead and I love my wife and kids. And Lord, I just need to start from scratch and just, what do you want? What do you want? Simply follow Jesus. So how would you do it? Who else would you want to take that journey with? Wow, that's a question. You may have a long list of people who might not want to take that journey with. Just being real, right? And you may not be on their We all have history. We all have baggage. We've all had this kind of relationship and that kind of relationship, and church of this kind and that flavor, and no church and lots of church and this and that and loud music and lights and none of that. And if you've ever been to a Quaker meeting, it's very quiet, completely different than rowdy lights and fog machines. And oh my gosh, oh my gosh, it's just so much. Imagine that following Jesus could be very simple. Very simple. And at the core of it, it's you and him. Remember in John 14, 15, 16, 17, Jesus is talking about the Father abiding in him and him abiding in the Father and them abiding in us. That's what he wants. That's what he wants. Is that what you want? It's what I want. I don't want to carry any extra baggage with me. I don't want my family carrying extra baggage. I want the reality of following Jesus, and I don't want distractions and noise and ridiculous stuff. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there are two components to this. There's following Jesus as an individual, and some people want to stop right there. It's like, people are weird. I don't want to deal with more people. Well, Ephesians 4 and a whole bunch of other scriptures are very clear. We're part of a body. The hand needs the foot, and the nose needs the eyes, and all of that. So there is part 2, which is how do we simply follow Jesus together? Let me go back to the introduction here. The second paragraph. What if you could follow Jesus and not get bogged down or burdened with human-made religion? You might wonder, is that even possible? Yes, it is. It absolutely is possible. What if there were other people who wanted to explore, that's an important word, with you what it means to follow Jesus? To explore what it means to simply follow Jesus. No matter where you're at in your journey, if you are convinced Jesus is the Messiah raised from the dead, or maybe you're just curious at this point, maybe somehow you found your way to this video and maybe you've not been wondering, or maybe you have been wondering, is there anything to Jesus? This Jesus thing. I mean, is it an idea? Is Jesus, a person who really was raised from the dead and still alive? Some people sure think so. What if you wanted to find out? So you might be convinced or you might be curious. And I would say that this is a good way to explore what it would look like. What do you think, believe, and do? What are the nuts and bolts, if you will? What does that really look like? What would it mean for your life, for my life, to simply follow Jesus? Whether you're convinced or curious, if that's your interest, then I encourage you to stay tuned and watch part 2, which will be coming out shortly. Again, I'm Steve Queen with LivewickMedia. I am very glad that I've been on this journey to simply follow Jesus. And I'm doing it not just alone, but with some wonderful people who feel exactly the same way. And if you're breathing, there's hope. So I hope that you'll check out part 2 that'll be coming on soon. And in the meantime, God bless you, and we'll look forward to the next one. Bye-bye.